Gentleman yields. I now recognize the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Luttrell, for 5 minutes of questioning.
Thank you all for coming today. Everyone in here said it. I spoke to my Democratic colleagues and my Republican colleagues, and our hearts are with you. And I hope that doesn't seem meaningless coming from where we're sitting today. Unfortunately, you've got to experience what Congress is all like right here in real life. And normally, when you're watching C-SPAN, you can usually turn it off. But this is how we interact with each other, unfortunately. But thank you, and I'm very, very sorry for your loss. I was a military man in my former life, and when forward deployed overseas, tasked with securing any given area, we followed that under the Constitution as military men, because we raised our right hand and swore to defend the Constitution of the United States. And sometimes our jobs were to prevent movement through any given space. Our job was to protect our men and women that were tasked underneath us, wholeheartedly, unconditionally. And in war, you lose men and women. You do. It's just part of the conflict. There's nothing that can be said to anybody when that happens, but it's absolute warfare. But as a military man, as an officer, if any given space that I was defending, if it was rushed by individuals and overtaken, I would be relieved of command. Plain and simple. My leadership would look down at me and like, you failed, we're going to relieve you of your duty. If I lost lives, and most likely, if it was negligent, I would be relieved of duty. Depending on the surge of numbers and however that played out, there could possibly have been a court-martial. And I lived by that. We all do. So when I see these numbers, and this is where I sit, why I'm going after the impeachment, is when I look to the leader that's supposed to be defending our country, and just numbers. I don't care if Democrat, Republican, just sheer numbers. Yearly, since the secretary has been in position, the numbers have grown exponentially. They have. Numbers of which, if that had happened to us overseas, it'd have been catastrophic. Because if my leadership didn't take control and act accordingly, the Navy would have. And then it would have grown and grown and grown until we were held accountable. Each year, since Secretary has been in place, those numbers for fentanyl deaths, sex trade, gang members, not to mention the amount of addiction. We talk about deaths, but the addiction rate is astronomical. If those numbers were dipping down, that's one thing, but they're progressively getting worse and worse. They're out of control. Professor, I have a question for you. I know that you don't support the impeachment of Secretary Mayorkas constitutionally. Do you support the removal, given the sheer numbers that we're seeing? Do you support the removal, or would you support the removal, period, of Secretary Mayorkas because of his failures to lead the Department of Homeland Security?
I'm simply not an expert on immigration policy.
No, it's a personal question.
I really don't have a position on the removal of Secretary Mayorkas.
Well,
as a matter of law, I don't think the basis.
No, this is a personal. I know you say constitutionally that is not the case. You don't support that. And I understand that completely. I understand your perspective, and I appreciate it. But the United States is one of the leading countries in sex trafficking. Houston, Texas, is the worst city in the country, which is in my district. I represent over 700,000 men and women in District 8 in the great state of Texas. And they are demanding the removal of Secretary Mayorkas, demanding it. And I'm the voice in Washington, D.C. to say, hey, I'm speaking for my people, and this is what they are demanding. So since the administration, President Biden will not remove Mr. Mayorkas constitutionally or however he sees it, and I understand your perspective, what I want to hear is, do you think Mr. Mayorkas needs to be removed because of his failure, in my opinion, in his role?
What I think you should tell your constituents in response to their demands is that they should vote for a different president.
Well, that's amen to that. I'm sure they're on board with that exact statement. But I do every day have to sit in front of the mothers and fathers of them that have lost their babies. And they're never going to get their babies back. And I can tell them to vote all day long, but 4 years is an extremely long time to have somebody failing us in protecting our borders. So the Republican Party is having to act and act accordingly. And that's why this impeachment process is happening. I understand. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.